There's a wind blowing across the South Seas. Long ago, it drew a fearless people across the Pacific to the enchanting islands of Polynesia, Fiji, Samoa, Hawaii, Tahiti. These epic voyagers were the Nomads of the wind. Sailing with the wind and navigating by the sun, the stars, and the moon, the first Polynesians were searching for a new life. What they found, we call paradise. In our next 5 programs, nature sets sail across the Pacific, following their course on a grand voyage of discovery. This is Tahiti, the heart of Polynesia, and it is here that our adventure begins.
Nomads of the Wind is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you. And by Canon, providing the power of imaging to express your visions at home and work. And by Ford, we drew on our global resources, tapped into advanced thinking from around the world, brought innovation and quality home, and built a totally new car. It's called Ford Contour, a world car for the 21st century.
The Polynesian Triangle is like an ancient spearhead thrust across the great Pacific Ocean. Long ago, a voyaging people made this their home. The story of the Polynesians is an epic natural history. Man and nature, each shaping the destiny of the other. "2,000 years before Columbus ventured across the Atlantic, a tenacious, voyaging people set out to conquer the Pacific. They undertook a journey that took them across a third of our planet. Little did they know they had accomplished the most miraculous oceanic feat in human history. The Pacific is the greatest wilderness on Earth, an endless inner space. It was more than an ocean, a universe unto itself, unpredictable and unknown. To this primordial world came another species that within a brief passage of time would become the most widespread form of life across the entire Pacific. These nomads of the wind crossed the vast Pacific in double-hulled canoes carved from tree trunks. They had no maps, no metal tools, no instruments of navigation. In their own language, they call themselves the people. They knew no others. When discovered by the outside world, they became known as the Polynesians. All Polynesian voyagers believed that beyond every horizon awaited undiscovered lands, an earthly paradise where they could start a new life, a place endowed by nature and blessed by their gods. More than 20,000 islands are scattered across the Pacific. Each one, like a jewel, rises from the sea, each a possibility for a new beginning. The island world of Polynesia forms a vast triangle, with Hawaii in the north, New Zealand in the far southwest, and to the east, lonely Easter Island. In the center of the triangle, midway between the continents of Asia and South America, lie the islands of Tahiti, the heart of the Polynesian world. It can be said that Tahiti was discovered many times, first by the Polynesians, then again by European navigators like Captain Cook and Captain Bligh. Tales of these South Sea islands lured others who wanted to discover Tahiti for themselves. Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick, and the French painter Paul Gauguin were among the many who came here to fulfill their dreams. The islands of Tahiti rose as volcanoes from the ocean bed only 1 million years ago, making them some of the newest lands on Earth. Their summits reach 7,000 feet. Up here, the air is always cool and moist, perfect for mosses and ferns that decorate the branches of evergreen trees stunted by the wind. Almost every afternoon brings rain, making this mountaintop one of the wettest places on Earth. The abundance of water has encouraged a luxuriance of plants. But here, in the middle of the world's greatest ocean, there is precious little variety of life. The handful of plant species that survived the ocean crossing were not guaranteed success. If they were lucky, lack of competition could allow them to flourish in unique and stunning ways. This island skink is one of the few lizards to have arrived on Tahiti. Sipping nectar from purata blossoms, it pollinates the plant, fulfilling a role usually reserved for insects or birds. It is no coincidence that fruit doves find such succulent fruits on Tahiti. The plants arrived here as seeds in the stomachs of the birds' ancestors. Since then, the doves and the trees have existed in perfect partnership. Tahiti is about as far away from any continent as you can get, some 4,000 miles from both California and Sydney, Australia. Cut off from the mainstream of life, it has been left to flourish on its own. Cascading streams are the lifeblood of the island's forests. Below their surface, animal life is sustained by nutrients carried by the flow. Long ago, these goby fish left their ancestral home on the reef to colonize these freshwater streams. By raising the flag-like fins along its back, the electric blue male signals his readiness to mate. If willing, the female leads him in an upright dance of courtship. Their fry will be carried downstream to mature in the warm nursery of the sea. The prawns which share this pool are scavengers, hunting for scraps on the stream bed. Like the gobies, these crustaceans are recent recruits to the fresh water of Tahiti. Their spawn will also be carried back toward the all-embracing sea. It is the constant cycle of fresh water that vitalizes this island. For travel-weary voyagers, Tahiti's abundance of fresh water, plus the rich lagoons and green mountains, made these islands the ultimate tropical dream. The welcome sight of coconut palms along the beach uplifted the spirits of many seafarers. It is one of the few tropical plants able to root and grow in the coral sand. The coconut palm proved to be invaluable. For these Pacific lorikeets, the palms are a constant larder and a shady playground in the heat of the day. For the Polynesians, the coconut palm became an indispensable source of food and raw materials, essential for day-to-day island life. To us, the image of the palm tree symbolizes paradise. The lagoon, the meeting place of land and sea. Enriched by nutrients swept down in the rivers, its warm, shallow waters nurture a dazzling array of life, like the great shoals of zebrafish which patrol among the coral heads. With many eyes alert to danger, there is safety in numbers. Spinner dolphins come to Tahiti's lagoons to seek shelter from the dangers of the open ocean. They move in family groups, communicating constantly by sound and touch. Courtship is gentle and playful. Here in the shelter of the lagoon, they can reinforce their bonds and perpetuate their line. Dolphins were held in great regard by Polynesians. They led voyagers to new islands and protected fishermen from sharks. Of all creatures in the sea, it is the dolphin, with its free-spirited way of life and commitment to family ties, that embodies the Polynesian voyaging tradition. The sun beats down on two worlds, sea and air, that meet at the surface of the lagoon. It is here that the great wealth of the tropics is most apparent. Frigate birds are nomadic masters of the ocean skies. Among seabirds, their flying skills are unmatched. They seldom wet their feathers in pursuit of fish. Instead, they specialize in aerial piracy, preferring to plunder someone else's booty, even from their own kind. Frigate birds are great ocean travelers, journeying hundreds of miles between islands. But when ready to mate, they return to their ancestral breeding grounds to build makeshift nests and compete for partners. The male birds signal their intentions by inflating a pouch of skin beneath the throat. The showy display is designed to attract passing females, and for those in peak breeding condition, it seems irresistible. But the signal triggers different responses from competing suitors. In a crowded colony, the flamboyant flash of red is a recipe for male conflict. For the first Polynesian sailors, a soaring flock of frigate birds could mean only one thing. Their journey was nearly at its end. After weeks at sea, excitement was tinged with anxiety that the newfound island might not be as blessed as the one they had left behind, or that it might already be inhabited. As leader of his people, it fell to the chief to guide them to safe landfall under their tiki's watchful eye. Only when inside the safety of the reef could they take in the nature of the island they had voyaged so far to find. Here was a shallow lagoon, well sheltered from the swell of the ocean, just as they had hoped. And behind the shoreline stretched a vast forest beyond which rose tall mountains cloaked in green. For generations, their ancestors had dreamed of such a place. Tangaroa, the god of seafarers, had been benevolent. Tangaroa had led them to an uninhabited island, a place to cultivate a new life. This was indeed the fabled heaven that lay beyond the rising sun. Tangaroa had not failed them. From today, this ancient god would stand supreme. From today, they would have an allegiance to a new whenua, a new land, which by skill and good fortune they would fashion into paradise. Early Tahitians feared the dark. It was the time when spirits haunted the human world. Fire protected the living from the dead. If blessed, this small band of pioneers would grow in numbers. They were skilled in fishing and horticulture. To ensure their success on an uninhabited island, they brought their entire culture with them. They brought their own breeding stock of pigs, dogs, and chickens. They also brought a treasure trove of edible and medicinal plants. Gardening was the key to their survival. In the fertile soil of this high volcanic island, seeds and cuttings needed only warmth and water to grow, and there is plenty of that on these tropical islands. By carefully cultivating their traditional trees and crops, the immigrants effectively transported their familiar landscapes to their adopted home. Within a few seasons, they would reap the fruits of their careful planning and good management. Until the land could be cultivated, they would rely on the natural resources of the island, especially those of the sea. Where rivers and streams enter the shallow lagoon, reef fish congregate, feeding on rich pickings. Driven by the beaters of the tide, the fish were funneled into traps built of rocks and coral stone. The ingenious maze finally led toward a blind alley where a single fisherman could scoop up enough for all. The rich lagoon was vital to the first Tahitians. Without it, their early settlements would have struggled to survive. Floating seeds are washed ashore. Coconut palms grow naturally along the shoreline. For the first Polynesians, all their physical needs of food and shelter were provided for by their generous island. In those days, they were free from infectious diseases, insect pests, and dangerous animals. The Barringtonia tree had long ago become a native of Tahiti. Known as hatu, its large nut was valued by all Polynesians as a powerful medicine. And, made into a paste, its grated kernel was smeared on coral heads to stun reef fish. The delicate flowers of the Barringtonia bloom in the morning light. By midday, they have wilted and fallen to the ground. The yellow-flowered hibiscus is indigenous to Tahiti, but the famous red-bloomed plants were brought by the first settlers from their homeland. In Tahitian folklore, every plant has its place. The spotted fruits of the nono made powerful medicines, and from its roots came a yellow dye. Other plants made shampoo for the hair and ointments for the skin. Mixed with seawater and coconut milk and heated to a paste, the grated Barringtonia nuts were often applied as a poultice to relieve aching muscles. Every Tahitian woman had her favorite remedies. Bathing in mountain streams was also a very popular activity. It was the principal remedy for any disease. Many took advantage of these crisp, clean waters and bathed in these streams twice a day. Those who first discovered Tahiti were very lucky. They found a lush island in the Pacific, rich in every way. This bountiful, easy living supported newcomers generation after generation. Ring-shaped coral reefs to the northeast of Tahiti mark the outlines of ancient volcanic islands which have sunk beneath the sea. The coral reefs protect the islands by acting as a buffer against the crashing waves, thus creating a peaceful lagoon. Within these waters, life is a profusion of shapes and colors. These are some of the most remote coral reefs in the Pacific. They lie thousands of miles from the most productive areas of the ocean, the rich waters of the coasts. To colonize these reefs, these species had to cross the vast blue water desert of the open ocean. Only a few species made the long journey. Unrestrained by competition, here they abound and multiply. For the Polynesians who settled on low coral atolls, survival required a special tenacity. With no forests, they were very dependent on the resources of the lagoon, with its bounty of edible seaweed and shellfish. The men were the fishermen, and the women gleaners of the reef. The roar of the distant surf was a constant reminder of the power of the ocean. It had carried their ancestors to this faraway heaven. Now it was their constant provider. Beyond the pounding surf, the open ocean linked the Polynesian world. Carried by wind and wave, other voyagers discovered new lands in this vast ocean. Northeast of Tahiti, 1,000 miles toward the equator, lie the remote and rugged Marquesas Islands. Compared to the tranquil islands of Tahiti, the jagged Marquesas came as a surprise. The writer Herman Melville described them as bold, rock-bound coasts with the surf pounding high against the lofty cliffs. Spurs of mountains clothed in tufted grass. There were no sandy beaches here, no quiet lagoons. These Marquesan islands were formed by volcanoes older than those of Tahiti. Millions of years of erosion have sculpted the harsh landscape into a fantastic labyrinth of pinnacles and gorges. As strange and rugged as these islands were, they still had the power to lure. It was here that the artist Paul Gauguin chose to live the last of his life, and it was here that he was buried. This landscape of powerful beauty is the realm of one of the world's most graceful creatures, the tropic bird. High above the valley floor, they speed in from the sea, their long tail plumes streaming behind them, to the head of the valleys where they rear their young. For the people of these remote and dramatic islands, these elusive white birds, part seabird, part creature of the land, echoed their own way of life. From the high plateau, rivers cascade into the canyons. This waterfall on the island of Nukuhiva plunges 1,200 feet, a fall 8 times greater than Niagara. Ever since Polynesians first settled the Marquesas, the island's sheltered valleys have been the key to their survival. Marquesan longbill warblers stake out their territories in song and issue a musical challenge to their neighbors. But the valley forests were not just a haven for wildlife on these rugged islands. They also provided the first human settlers with the basic requirements of timber for construction, rich soil for crops, and above all, abundant fresh water. In the sluggish waters of murky creeks, Marquesan women waded in search of freshwater prawns. By the riverbank, native chestnut trees spread their curtains of roots into the water, trapping twigs and debris carried by the gentle current. The shady depths of this miniature underwater jungle are the daytime hiding place of long-clawed river prawns. In the absence of a coral reef, the Marquesan women shifted their gleaning skills inland. Marquesan prawns, like those on Tahiti, are newcomers to freshwater life, but these murky rivers provide a perfect habitat, and they thrive in great numbers. River gleaning did not yield as much as the coral reefs of Tahiti, but these efforts would provide a valuable harvest of basic protein and a tasty supplement to the family fare. Their real staple diet came from an entirely different source. The Marquesas Islands were discovered by Polynesian people more than 2,000 years ago. They brought with them a plant that was essential to their survival. It was the staff of life, the breadfruit. It could not be eaten raw, but baked or steamed, it was tasty as well as highly nutritious. The breadfruit tree reaches maturity in 5 or 6 years, and full grown produces as many as 150 fruits a year. The task of picking the heavy fruits was entrusted to agile young men, who skillfully netted them on long poles, and with a twist, retrieved them into the waiting basket. It was a communal task for the benefit of the entire family group to whom this tree belonged. When a child was born, a new tree was planted. It would produce fruits for about 50 years, enough sustenance for a lifetime. No wonder the first European explorers to the Pacific were filled with admiration and envy at the sight of such a bountiful tree. In centuries to come, Captain William Bligh of the ill-fated Bounty was commissioned to the South Seas to collect cuttings of this miracle plant. For the Marquesans, the breadfruit, brought to the islands by their foresighted ancestors, was their most treasured inheritance. Peeling breadfruit with a sharpened cowrie shell was an acquired skill. The tree fruits seasonally, not year-round, so the people had to be prepared to harvest it. The appeal of breadfruit is that it can be stored for a long period of time. In the Marquesas, droughts can occur for years in a row. In other years, it pours incessantly. Since the people have experienced famine of devastating proportions, they've learned to store food in times of plenty. A diet of breadfruit may not seem the most appetizing, especially by the time it has fermented into a sticky mass which smells like rotting cheese. But the Polynesians and their subsequent European visitors all enjoyed its unique flavor. Sliced with a bamboo blade, the starchy pith is stacked in a tall vessel, constructed of wood and lined with plaited coconut leaves to be trampled to a pulp. This barefoot task was considered an honor and was traditionally performed by a circumcised young man with the tattoo marks of manhood and who had abstained from making love during the breadfruit harvest. Around his loins he wore a ceremonial wrap of bark cloth dyed with the yellow pigment of the no-no tree. The final product, the ma, was stored underground in pits lined with stones and specially plaited leaves of the cordyline tree, a sugary plant which had magical properties to help preserve and protect their precious communal larder. Here, beneath the forest floor, the breadfruit harvest could lie for months, even years, a stockpile against failure of their crops. As Marquesan society expanded, rivalry developed between neighboring valleys. Each tribe constructed elaborate ceremonial meeting places, paved areas they called tohua, with large pits of fermented breadfruit for times of famine. But in times of war, the gods demanded that the enemy be defiled by acts of cannibalism and human sacrifice. This was the dark side of the South Pacific. Stories of their cannibalism horrified European sailors who could not believe such violence could exist on these friendly isles. Meat was scarce in the tropics, so pigs became a precious commodity. Brought on voyaging canoes by the island's founding ancestors, they became highly esteemed as wealth and were given the protection of tribal law. Only chiefs could eat the flesh. To commoners and all women, they were taboo. The word taboo is Polynesian. It is a powerful force imposed on property and places, from a single breadfruit tree to an entire mountain. It means sacred and implies keep off. It threatens retribution to all who disobey. The thief who raids this breadfruit tree risks painful death in the jaws of a shark. The concept of taboo was the Polynesian way of preserving their island's precious resources for the select few. The Fei banana tree only fruits once in its life. It was a delicacy reserved for chiefly people. Members of the ruling class were not expected to undertake manual work. They were supported entirely by the labor of the common people. Rank and status were dependent on inheritance. The chief's authority was absolute. In this stratified society, life for commoners could be one of hard labor. But among men of equal status, cooperation was the key to success. Helping a neighbor build a house or giving food to someone hungry was a deep-rooted social tradition. In a small community where each individual was known to all of his neighbors, such generosity was sure to be repaid. The panels used to thatch this Marquesan house are made from coconut leaves, a tough yet perishable material. Firmly fastened to the framework beneath, they will resist the weather for several years. Outsiders perceive the Polynesian way of life to be long and leisurely, but in reality, these people were rarely idle. Food production, canoe building, and house maintenance were just some of the duties expected of the islanders. Working together formed a sense of community. Their sense of kinship was strong. Indeed, most likely they all had common ancestors. Spirits communicated with the living through mediums, human images carved in wood or stone. The rustling leaves signal the presence of a spirit, entreated to enter their sacred tiki. Offerings of fish and fruit presented to the spirit would ensure good fortune. Of all nature's totems, the most potent were red feathers. In the remote beauty of the Marquesan Islands, their culture fostered a distinctive art form with great social importance. The word tattoo is Polynesian. It means to puncture. Over many centuries, they perfected the skill of decorating the body with intricate designs. Traditionally, the tools were made from the teeth of dogs or boars, and the pigment from the soot of burnt candle nuts. The tattoo artist had great prestige. He was paid in pigs and pearls, for it was a sign of manly affluence to afford such skin-deep beauty and to endure such pain. The process was potentially so dangerous that the client was referred to as the victim. Captain Cook's sailors were the first Europeans to witness such tattooings. They were so intrigued that they got tattooed as well, thus beginning a tradition that sailors continue to this day. For Polynesians, gods and spirits shared the same earthly world as people. Through their tikis, they communicated with their ancestors to whom they offered sacrifices, often of human life. To the west of Tahiti lies the island of Raiatea, the birthplace of gods and men. Its name means the Faraway Heaven. Beneath the shadow of its sacred mountain is an ancient ceremonial site, a place called Tapu Tapuatia, which means most sacred, most feared. At the center of this site stands the massive investiture stone, the four corners of which were originally supported by the fresh corpses of 4 men, sacrificed to be guardians of this sacred standing stone. This holy island was visited by chiefs and nobility who arrived in canoes from neighboring islands. They arrived just before daybreak and were joined by the high priest and powerful chiefs of Raiatea. They prepared their ritual appeasement of the gods. Each delegation carried sacrificial offerings of great sharks and turtles and of men to be sacrificed. At sunrise, Raiatea, the faraway heaven, was bathed in blood. Far from the dark heart of Raiatea, above a remote Marquesan shore, tropic birds perform their elegant dance of courtship. At the climax of their aerial display, they fly backwards through the sky. Ever since Polynesian voyagers came to these remote islands, the vision of the tropic bird dancing in the sky was a sign that they had arrived at their new homeland. The pure white bird with a streak of red in its tail embodied the free spirit of their newfound life and inspired this dance in its honor. It was from these oceanic islands of Tahiti and the Marquesas that other generations of voyagers set out in search of new lands, Hawaii to the north, Easter Island to the east, and New Zealand to the far southwest, the distant corners of the Polynesian Triangle. But from where did these enigmatic people come? Ask the Marquesans about their origins, and they will point you to the west. From there, long ago, came their voyaging ancestors. Born on the wind like tropic birds, they came from a land far beyond the setting sun.
Nomads of the Wind is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by annual financial support from viewers like you. And by Canon, providing the power of imaging to express your visions at home and work. And by Ford, maker of the new Ford Contour, a world car for the 21st century.
This is PBS.